Welcome to This Explainer. We see plants literally every single day. We walk past them, we keep them on our desks. But today, we're going way beyond the surface. We're going to shrink down to the microscopic level to unpack one of the absolute most efficient manufacturing processes on the entire planet: photosynthesis. So let's explore this hidden biological machinery that's operating silently right under our noses.
Okay, let's dive into this. It's so incredibly easy to just appreciate the aesthetics of nature, right? The vibrant colors, the lush greenery, how nice a park looks in the spring. But in doing so, we kind of forget about the literal heavy lifting happening at the microscopic level inside every single leaf. So today, we're going to unpack exactly what nature's greatest contribution actually is and why it is absolutely critical to our entire global ecosystem. Section 1. The ultimate life support. Because those hidden mechanics inside every leaf are exactly what keep our planet breathing. When we strip away all that beauty and fragrance, we're left with a pretty stark biological reality. Plants are an absolute necessity for life on Earth. Period. Through the magic of photosynthesis, they operate as the ultimate provider of food and oxygen for the whole globe. I like to think of a plant as a highly advanced, ultra-efficient solar factory. And to truly understand how any factory processes its goods, we can't just stare at the finished product. We have to start at the ground level, literally, and work our way up the supply chain. Which brings us to Section 2, gathering the raw materials. Let's trace how these vital supplies begin their upward journey. Let's map this journey out. If we take a closer look at a plant, its very first crucial step happens completely out of sight. The plant is firmly anchored in the soil by its roots, and those roots act as the primary intake valves, absorbing essential water right out of the ground. But that water doesn't just sit there. Through an incredibly intricate network of tiny specialized tubes, this water is transported upward. It acts exactly like a high-speed manufacturing conveyor belt, moving the water straight up into the stem and then finally delivering it directly to the leaves, which is where the real work goes down. Now that the water has finally reached its destination, we really need to talk about the factory floor itself, the leaf. Have you ever noticed how the stem positions the leaves in a very deliberate way? It's doing that so they can absorb the absolute maximum energy from the sunlight. Structurally, a leaf consists of this flat, thin part called the lamina, and it's joined to the stem by a little structure called a petiole. Because it's so flat and wide, the lamina provides this massive surface area. It acts literally like a giant solar panel purposefully angled to trap as much sunlight as possible. Section 3. Inside the leaf factory. Let's zoom right in to a cross-section of the leaf and see this specialized factory floor up close. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the stark visual contrast in the leaf's internal organization. Looking closely, the upper layer features cells that are flat and irregular, and then just below that very top surface, you get this tightly packed layer of cells. But contrast that with the lower layer. The next layer down has these very loosely arranged cells separated by surprisingly large air spaces. This lower section also houses those specific transport tubes we talked about earlier, the ones busy bringing the absorbed water into the leaf. It's essentially a perfectly organized, dual-layered factory floor. And deep within that airy lower layer, we find a vital piece of machinery. Down there are tons of tiny pores called stomata. Think of these stomata as the dynamic intake valves for our leaf factory. And each individual stoma is surrounded by two specialized guard cells. These guard cells act as the gatekeepers. They actively regulate the opening and closing of the stomata. When they pop open, the leaf absorbs carbon dioxide straight from the surrounding environment. That CO2 passes right through the stomata, moves into those large air spaces in the lower layer, and prepares to finally meet up with the water. Section 4. The magic of chloroplasts. We have reached the exact organelles where the chemical magic finally happens. So those carbon dioxide molecules and water molecules make their way up into the tightly packed cells we saw earlier in the upper layer. And these cells contain specialized organelles called chloroplasts. Both the water and the carbon dioxide are finally absorbed directly into these little chloroplasts. Now, these organelles are also where we find chlorophyll. The pigment that actually gives the leaf its vibrant green color. But chlorophyll isn't just there for aesthetics, it is the absolute key to trapping the energy from the sunlight hitting our lamina solar panel. And this brilliantly illustrates the plant's literal manufacturing recipe step by step. Inside the chloroplasts, the factory fires up. Using that trapped sunlight energy to force a powerful chemical reaction, they take those raw ingredients, the carbon dioxide from the air and the water from the roots, and synthesize them. And the end products coming off this biological assembly line? Glucose and oxygen. Section 5. Powering the planet. Let's zoom back out and see how the products of this microscopic factory sustain literally everything. Once synthesized, the oxygen and glucose molecules diffuse right out of the chloroplast. But from there, they have two completely different destinies. Let's look at glucose first. The plant obviously needs to feed itself, so the glucose, acting as food, gets transported through other specialized tubes to all parts of the plant, aiding directly in its growth. On the other hand, the oxygen enters those large air spaces we saw in the loosely packed lower layer. From there, it diffuses completely out of the leaf through the open stomata, exiting the factory and entering our environment as a vital byproduct. So, the crucial point is this. Oxygen is given off as the life-sustaining gaseous component of our atmosphere. Literally, the very oxygen you just breathed in to listen to this sentence, it was manufactured inside a microscopic chloroplast, moved through an internal airspace, and diffused out of a tiny stomapore on a leaf somewhere. How crazy is that? It is just an awe-inspiring cycle of life. Let's move to this recap and see how this builds our understanding of the whole macro to micro journey. Our solar factory operates flawlessly. The roots gather the water from the deep soil, the stomata gather the carbon dioxide from the surrounding air, the chlorophyll inside the massive lamina traps the sunlight. Then the chloroplasts take all these elements and synthesize them into glucose and oxygen. The glucose is transported to fuel the plant's ongoing growth, while the oxygen diffuses out to sustain all animal and human life on Earth. It's a perfect, self-sustaining loop. Which leaves us with this final thought. We started today by just noticing the colors and the fragrance of plants, the stuff we see every day. But now we've seen the magnificent, complex engineering hidden right inside their leaves. So the next time you walk outside, feel the sun on your face, and take a deep, refreshing breath of air, will you remember the countless microscopic solar factories working tirelessly around you to make it all possible? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep exploring, and never stop marveling at the incredible mechanics of our natural world.